During an event yesterday in the Oval Office, President Trump said that his efforts to fight crime in Washington, D.C. have been effective, and families can now, quote, walk right down the middle of the street. Wow. He managed to get rid of the crime and the cars?
Yes. Well, as long as Democrats don't run the children over, as they're so wont to do, aren't they? Oh, once again, a very happy Thursday morning to you in the United States of America, the greatest country that God ever created. And it was quite an exchange. It was prompted by our last brilliant caller, Justin, because he talked about the Democrats and he talked about common sense being rare, uncommon these days, for sure. And the Democrat Party and the government more broadly, failure to provide safety and security for citizens in America and big cities, and how, were the geniuses that founded this greatest country ever. They knew all of this was coming. How did they know? Before electricity, before cable television, how did they know all of this? Just genius. Just a gift from God were they to humankind, and certainly to the United States of America and our past, present, and future, provided, a republic if you can keep it, as Benjamin Franklin famously said, and holding on to our rights while Democrats try to pry them from our cold, dead hands because they're not on our side. But since Justin brought it up, it prompted Michael. Michael said, there was this moment yesterday in a Senate hearing. It was a confirmation hearing, in fact, that was going on in the Foreign Relations Committee, a confirmation hearing, and the Democrats trying to obstruct everything. And there is a Democrat criminal who is also a senator from Virginia. His name is Tim Kaine. He ran for vice president one time. And Tim Kaine, yesterday in this hearing, angrily denouncing the notion that our rights come from God, natural rights. Now, these concepts go back to the early days of the Enlightenment in Europe centuries ago, and John Locke, who, during the Enlightenment, saying, well, we have God-given rights, that your rights are not gifted to you by the monarchy, which during the Enlightenment in England is pretty much what they had, and it's not given to you by the state that can then take your rights away. But your rights are God-given rights, right? And this does come out of the Enlightenment, the Western civilization emerging. And John Locke, one of your mainstream kind of liberal Enlightenment political philosophers, and it's in the Declaration of Independence. But I want to, Ted Cruz talks about that. But listen to this. Listen to the Democrat Senator Tim Kaine yesterday in a Senate hearing denouncing God-given rights and saying, no, we will give you your rights and we will take them away. Right? It's like the vaccine fight going on in Florida right now. It's the Democrats want to mandate vaccines for everybody. They don't care that the long term, the short term, the consequences, that they don't care about humanity or human life. They're like the communists meeting in China with Xi Jinping, Ricochet Rabbit, and Vlad the Impaler Putin, and Kim Jong-un, who he executed his uncle using anti-aircraft guns in front of bleachers full of people so they could watch his uncle be torn to pieces with the anti-aircraft gun because he angered his nephew. It's the family that blows each other up together. But let's go to Tim Kaine, this Foreign Relations Committee confirmation hearing yesterday, denouncing the fundamental foundations of Western civilization since the Enlightenment.
The notion that rights don't come from laws and don't come from the government, but come from the Creator, that's what the Iranian government believes. It's a theocratic regime that bases its rule on Shia law and targets Sunnis, Baha'is, Jews, Christians, and other religious minorities. And they do it because they believe that they understand what natural rights are from their Creator. So the statement that our rights do not come from our laws or our governments is extremely troubling.
Wow. That is, and this guy is a United States Senator, and isn't he worth like $100 million or something? This guy, he ought to be gassed in a gas chamber, running around in circles. I want to make it fun somehow. We got to make a game out of it, I think. He shouldn't really be gassed in a gas chamber. But, they're all about that would be more on their lane. Now, while Tim Kaine was saying, well, the idea that our rights, our natural rights, that John Locke or the English, European political philosophers of the Enlightenment had their finger on the pulse of anything, that's ridiculous. No, our rights come from the state, from the government, from laws and the government, laws passed by people like him. And the government, that's where your rights come from, according to this radical extremist, fascist Democrat named Senator Tim Kaine. Now, Senator Ted Cruz, who is a legal genius and, even a Harvard law professor emeritus, Alan Dershowitz, said that Ted Cruz was one of the brightest students, if not the brightest student he ever had in law school. He said that Barack Obama also went to school there, but was nothing to write home about. And Ted Cruz walked in while this ridiculous clown, Tim Kaine, was slashing and torching the very foundation of our democratic republic, of our constitutional republic, being pulled up by the roots here by Tim Kaine, right? And Ted Cruz walked in, and he heard this, and he was shocked. His eyebrows went up. He was slack-jawed. He grabbed a pen and a notepad.
So Senator Kaine said in this hearing that he found it a radical and dangerous notion that you would say our rights came from God and not from government. I just walked into the hearing as he was saying that, and I almost fell out of my chair. Because that radical and dangerous notion, in his words, is literally the founding principle upon which the United States of America was created. And if you do not believe me, and you made reference to this, Mr. Barnes, then you can believe perhaps the most prominent Virginian to ever serve, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote in the Declaration of Independence, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator."
That's the
not by
state.
Government, not by the Democratic National Committee, but by God.
The Democrats believe that the state is God. That's what communism is all about. And he compared this criminal, this corrupt maroon, Tim Kaine, said, oh, well, that's what Iran believes. That's what the Ayatollahs believe. First of all, far be it for me to point out that there's a significant difference between the practice of fundamentalist Islam and mainstream Christianity and Christendom and the standards and practices, but never mind that. And Ted Cruz, the headline in the Christian Post, because they know what they're talking about, even if the Washington Post doesn't. Ted Cruz torches Tim Kaine for describing God-given rights as very, very troubling. Very, very troubling. Yeah, the whole idea, the foundational principles of the United States, of our constitutional republic, very, very troubling to this Democrat. Senator Ted Cruz ripped his colleague, Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat, Virginia, on Wednesday for describing the idea that human rights come from God and not the government as very, very troubling. Sure. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And I just played the audio for you of an actual bright, intelligent, serious constitutional scholar in Senator Ted Cruz, the Republican from Texas, as opposed to the extremely corrupt and dim-witted Tim Kaine. And wow, aren't they amazing? They surely are. And honestly, since Justin brought that up in the last phone call, that was an important thing to get to from yesterday's hearing. I have to say it's stunning to me that the principle that God has given us natural rights is now deemed by Democrats some radical and dangerous notion, Ted Cruz said during the nomination hearing, the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Democrats are trying to obstruct the nominations, of course. Tim Kaine unsuccessfully ran with former Secretary of State Hillary Diane Rodham Clinton as her vice presidential running mate candidate in 2016 and lost to, of course, Donald Trump, which was one of the funniest days in my political life, for sure. Isn't that amazing? All right, now, we've been talking about the dim-witted Democrats in Chicago who love crime and wah, wah, wah. And I want to get back to some of that. Now, before I get back to the audio, Michael, let's go to the telephones. Let's go to Gene, calling from the great state of Indiana. Gino, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hi, Chris. Hey, I want to start off by extending my thoughts and prayers to the Democrats that are mourning the 11 drug cartel members that got blown a bit. May they all rest in pieces.
Rest in pieces. Very good. You came loaded for bear. That is great.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Chris, I'm getting concerned about, especially this time delay, so to speak, on whether or not Trump is going to bring, the guard into Chicago. It's not like how he did D.C. That was swift and fast and somewhat an element of surprise. And I think as more time goes on, and you know as well as I do, Chris, that we cannot underestimate these Democrats, especially somebody like Pritzker, because he is very calculated, very mean, and he doesn't want to be shown up. He does not want to give Trump a victory. And right now, as we speak, they could be bringing in gang members and beefing up their arsenal as far as criminals. And I'm just concerned that it could be, a real bloodbath, innocent people caught in the crossfire, possibly our own troops overwhelmed. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, you phrased it quite well, Gene, actually, and I am concerned. I've been trying to avoid using the terminology that I'm thinking frequently enough, and that is that the Democrats seem to be pushing for armed conflict. The Democrats seem to be pushing for more bloodshed. They want a clash, an ideological clash, a political clash. They want it to be violent. They shot Trump once, right, in Butler, Pennsylvania. A suicidal Democrat did. Who was shot and killed. One shot, one killed by a Secret Service counter sniper. Just yesterday or day before yesterday, we had the guy in Florida in court who had plotted to assassinate Trump on his golf course in Florida. We have grand juries letting people go free after they assault federal law enforcement officers on camera, and they let them go. The Democrats are fighting for criminals and for crime and for illegal alien gang members and for their hero, Abrego Garcia, Kilmore Abrego Garcia, the MS-13 gang member. They're on the side of criminals, crime, gangs, murderers, rapists, and they're completely out of the closet, bare naked in favor of crime and illegal alien gangs. And you're right when it comes to Governor Pritzker, the billionaire who grew up a billionaire, and he remains a billionaire, and he never earned a dollar in his life, an honest dollar in his life. And so we've got that going on all over the place. And would we see a very different scenario deploying the guard in Chicago? I think there is a distinct possibility that it could be very different. And you're right, the Democrats appear to be gearing up for conflict, like they would be waging war, a violent armed insurrection. And they are insurrectionists. Let me say the governor is an insurrectionist. The mayor of Chicago, let's go, Brandon Johnson, an insurrectionist, because they are rebelling against an established government, the federal government, the elected president of the United States. And that's what the word insurrection means. Not that anybody in the news media knows what these words mean, and they use the words all the time, but they don't know what they mean. So, yeah, I've got to say, Gene, that you're not off base. I think that you raise very legitimate concerns. It'd be very different than Washington, D.C., because just open criminals run the city and the state, the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. They're called Democrats. Gene, good, thoughtful stuff. Thank you. You know, the big wireless companies are pulling one over on all of us, and it's time to make the switch to consumer cellular. I made the switch to Consumer Cellular. I'm getting the same fast, reliable, nationwide, big wireless coverage without the big wireless cost on your bill at the end of every month. It's not just about saving money at the end of every month, which is good. It's also about not being used and abused by the big wireless phone companies. Do you have any idea how much data you use every month? Probably not. I have no idea how much data I use every month. Most people over 50 use less data than, anybody under 40, and you use about 8 gigs a month probably. But big wireless, well, they shove you into an unlimited plan and make you pay for it because they need you to cover the cost of 19-year-olds who use 10 times as much data as you use every month. And, if you're not using all that data, then you are the one being used and abused. When you've had enough of that, make the switch to Consumer Cellular. They set me up with a service and a phone, amazing phone, and it's easy to make the switch. You make a phone call, you talk to an actual human being, not a robot and a touchpad, based right here in the United States, not on a space platform, real human beings who are actually helpful. It'll take you about 20 minutes, and you'll save money every month. You'll thank me later. Give them a call today and make the switch. Call 1-800-760-0702. That's 800-760-0702. Yes, sir. Why is it that all of our listeners, our callers, are so much smarter than Democrat members of the Senate? All right, and one of the things I absolutely have to get to today is Xi Jinping and Vlad the Impaler Putin talking about stealing organs from young people and giving them to themselves in transplants so that they can live forever. They will be immortal if they just keep stealing organs from people that they murder. This is what communists do. Democrats kill 1 million babies a year and harvest their organs in the United States alone. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to Brad calling from Key West, Florida. Bradley, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Chris, always. Barbara Ann's forever. Anyways, I'm watching right now RFK Jr. getting tortured by a Senate committee. And you always talk about how they use the words but don't know what they mean. But I saw a guy use a word, knows what it means, but twisted it as a attack against RFK Jr. And the word is ideology. And the person should have asked, is this your ideology? But he did not. He said, is this your ideology? Trying to make him sound like an idiot.
Yeah, well, it is sort of an alternate pronunciation of ideology. Some people do say ideology. But you're right that the Democrats are sabotaging. They're trying to assassinate his character. Another Kennedy in the crosshairs of the left in the United States. And we have some audio from that hearing for you coming up. But first, the Commies. Now, there was a really wild moment in communist China, in the capital city of Beijing, where the communist world leader terrorists are meeting. Xi Jinping of communist China meeting Vlad the Impaler, the old Soviet KGB Stasi communist who's now again permanently in charge of Russia, stealing everything, killing everyone, invading neighbors, massacring his own people and Ukrainians too, throwing women down elevator shafts in Moscow because they wrote something about Putin that he didn't like. He's a murderer, a killer, a gangster. But these commies are marching along, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. They had little Kim next to him, but he was not engaged in this conversation. But the two communist leaders of China and of Russia, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, were caught on a hot mic moment. They're having a back and forth. They're walking, they're strolling with Kim and a crowd of terrified killers flanking them. And they started talking about how they could be immortal if they just keep stealing organs from living people. And, you know, they do this in communist China. They use Uyghurs, a Muslim ethnic group in Western China, to throw in prison and they test their blood, and they do tests to see if they're matches for party officials, for Chinese party officials, and they kill them and steal their organs. This is not new news, but it's not news that's reported very frequently. And they also do this with prisoners, Chinese prisoners that have been convicted of crimes that they may or may not have committed, and they're in prison, and the Chinese powerful, the party, Communist Party people, they can use the organs of Uyghurs, ethnic Muslim group in the West, or prisoners who are ethnic Chinese and might be better matches. But the headline from the BBC, organ transplants for immortality, might Xi and Putin be onto something? Because BBC, they think maybe there's a good... and they begin their story, is it possible to become immortal with the help of organ transplants? That was the unexpected topic of conversation this week between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir the Impaler Putin when they met at a military parade in Beijing. A translator speaking in Mandarin on behalf of Putin told Xi Jinping how human organs can be repeatedly transplanted so that one can get younger and younger in spite of age, right? Now, I want to play the audio for you, and then the translators are struggling a bit. But this is the world's leading communist leaders, Xi Jinping. Now, that's the regime that has killed more people than any regime in the history of the world. At least 50 million of their own people murdered by the regime, and probably, according to more recent research, 75 million people murdered by the regime. The Putin representing the old Soviet regime that is responsible for murdering at least 30 million people inside their own borders for the most part. But then they started the war in Korea, the Korean War. They started the war in Vietnam, the Vietnam War. They started wars all over the place. They gave us Pol Pot in Cambodia, millions dead there. They love murdering millions. But listen to Vlad the Impaler Putin and Xi Jinping as they talk about immortality and stealing organs from living people so that they can extend their own lives.
In the past, people rarely lived longer than 70 years. But today, they say that at 70, you are still a child.
Human organs can be continuously transplanted. The longer you live, the younger you become, and can even achieve immortality.
You can even achieve immortality because you get fresh organs, and you get the older you get, the younger you become. You're still a child. Used to be 70 was old. Now 70 is young, and you get new organs installed, and boom, you're young again. You're and this is what they do. They beat your teeth out with a rifle butt, knock you out, maybe shoot you in the head and take your organs. But they probably keep you alive to take their organs. And it's not as though this is unprecedented in communist China. It most certainly is not. And Putin and Xi are serious. This is not some academic or absurdist conversation. They're talking about killing people to steal their organs. Some of them might even live if it's a kidney or something, but probably not because they don't care about human life. But that's their immortality because they live in a godless society, communism. They don't believe in eternal life because, there is no afterlife. And that kind of goes to, like Senator Tim Kaine, and your rights are not God-given, they're given by the state. And that's what the communists would tell you. That's what Xi Jinping would tell you, what Vladimir Putin would tell you, Kim Jong-un would tell you. Isn't that amazing? So their immortality, that's what they're talking about, by stealing your organs. And this, I know it sounds so ridiculous that you must be just being absurd, right? But no, they're not being absurd. They're being communists. They're being murderers. And that's their version of life after death, is stealing some young man's organs to have them installed in themselves so that they can claim to be young again and live, be immortal, become immortal. Isn't that amazing? Now let's go because CNN, they were covering the Chinese military parade, and they really liked it. And they had a fake anchor, a fanker named Caitlin Collins, who's perky and not very bright. Talking to a reporter named Ivan Watson, who is considerably more intelligent. But they're talking back and forth about the military parade, and get a load of this.
We're watching live pictures tonight, right now, a massive parade underway in Beijing as the Chinese President Xi Jinping is showing off his country's arsenal and military might to the world.
This is a message of strength. This is a message of victory. After all, they are commemorating the 80th anniversary of the surrender of Japan. This is a demonstration to China and the world that China is strong. It can protect itself.
They're doing reading the public relations statement from the communist regime where they're talking about killing young men and stealing their organs, and they're showing their strength because strong like bull. Now, they didn't exactly defeat the Japanese in World War II. The United States defeated the Japanese in World War II. The British made a major contribution. We worked with the Chinese. In fact, I used to work with a man, Ray Cromley, who was a reporter at the Pentagon while I was assigned to the Pentagon. And Ray Cromley, who was 40 years older than me, I think, an amazing U.S. Army intelligence officer in World War II, who worked with the Chinese in the mountains during World War II to fight against the Japanese. And he worked with a small guerrilla band and befriended the head of the guerrilla band. And the head of the guerrilla band that he worked with during the war turned out to be Mao Zedong. And I knew Ray Cromley, and I talked to Ray Cromley about his time in China as a U.S. Army colonel and intelligence officer working with Mao Zedong before Mao was famous. He didn't become famous till 1949, the Communist Revolution. An amazing story, but a side story. So there is, and at CNN, they're showing their strength. They're strong like bull. They are mighty. They're mighty. They're letting it all hang out. And then CNN, pretty amazing stuff. Back in May, you may remember that we had a military parade marking, I believe it was the 250th anniversary of the United States Army. And President Trump called for a parade. My best girl and I, we were down there at the parade. We were there for the parade down in the mall on the big avenue by the Washington Monument and stuff. And when the U.S. was having a military parade, CNN covered it this way with the aptly named Charles Blow. Charles Blow, a longtime New York Times clown who was on CNN attacking President Trump and the United States of America during our May 5th military parade in Washington.
We don't need a military parade. We don't need to spend millions or maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to do that.
Hundreds of millions.
But we want to do it because he has to feed his inner image monster.
Right. Monster has to feed his monster or something. And that's how CNN covered the American military parade. Isn't that amazing? But the Chinese military parade showing their strength, isn't it? And their tank looks just like our M1 tank because they stole it. Their fighter jet looks just flying overhead, looks just like an F-16 because they stole it from us. President Trump yesterday at the White House, talking to the press again, was asked about the Chinese military parade where, they're hypersonic missiles, their tanks. It was a very big military parade. And were they spending hundreds of millions of dollars? Charles Blow, they just make up lies about everything. Charles Blow makes up lies about everything. But he is called Charles Blow. What would you expect? President Trump yesterday.
I thought it was a beautiful ceremony. I thought it was very, very impressive. But I understood the reason they were doing it, and they were hoping I was watching, and I was watching. President Xi's a friend of mine, but I thought that the United States should have been mentioned last night during that speech because we helped China.
And we did help China, and we defeated the Japanese, and the Chinese did not defeat the Japanese in World War II. Harry Truman, a Democrat, dropped 2 atomic bombs, you may recall, on one on Hiroshima and one on Nagasaki. And by the way, the Japanese surrender in World War II was August 14th and not September 3rd, but the Chinese maybe not very good at math. Chinese not good at math? How can that be? So President Trump, maybe the Chinese should have thanked us since we actually defeated the Japanese, and we're talking about the end of World War II. 80 years later, 1945, 2025, President Trump.
We helped China very much, as you know, when they talk about freedom And I don't believe that, and maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't believe that America, that the United States was acknowledged for helping China to gain its freedom. But perhaps that was just a sleight of hand.
Well, and it's true that we saved them from the Japanese, who had brutalized them in the rape of Nanking, and Unit 731, biological warfare experimentation with Chinese and with prisoners of war that the Japanese, when they were savage and brutal, perpetrated. All that good stuff. But it's true, we won World War II, certainly in the Pacific. The Soviets lost a lot of people in the war in Europe, but, we smashed the fascists. It was mostly my father. He did almost all of it. But here is, I'm embellishing for effect, President Trump saying, hey, but I'll still sit down with the commies.
My relationship with all of them is very good. We're going to find out how good it is over the next week or two.
Over the next week or two. That's kind of fun. And, this is, can you imagine, I was talking about this yesterday on Newsmax. It is, imagine the world today with Xi Jinping, Putin, and Lil Kim Jong-un meeting in Beijing and the military parade going on, with Joe Biden in the White House and or imagine, even worse, maybe Kamala Harris in the White House, and millions of Democrats voted for Kamala Harris because they don't understand very much, do they? They don't get a lot. That's for sure. All right, let's do, because we've been talking about crime in Chicago and all the madness there. Remarkable things going on. Let's go to, and I just love that the organ transplants will grant them immortality. All right, godless commies, just kill you, steal your organs, put them in me. And now I'm young again. And that's literally what these world leaders are seriously talking about, because that's what communism is. That's what communism is, honestly. Boy, oh boy, I am telling you. Oh, actually, let's jump ahead of Chicago. Let's go to number 12, because the news media and the entertainment media, all Democrat propaganda apparatus. Stephen Colbert said, oh, yeah, we over the weekend, Labor Day weekend, the Democrats were spreading an obviously false rumor that President Trump had died, and listened to the crowd go wild at the idea that Trump had died or been killed.
This weekend, the biggest story was frenzied social media rumors speculating whether Donald Trump had died. For the record, Donald Trump is very much alive, okay? And no, we like our presidents alive.
This is late night comedy from Democrats. Jimmy Kimmel also is paid multi-million dollar salary to do Democrat Party propaganda.
There's a rumor making the rounds this weekend that Trump was dead because he hadn't been in front of a camera for a few days. That's how much he's in front of a camera. When we don't see him there, we assume he must be dead. Despite the fact that he looks like a pumpkin that got left in the hatchback on a 100-degree day, he is definitely not dead. Everyone gets all worked up. Here's the thing. Donald Trump will never die. Forget it. He's like Dracula. He's going to keep sucking the life out of us forever. There will be no more trans in Transylvania when he is done.
They really love this transgender thing, don't they? They're screwed up in the head beyond repair, I think. Tim Walz we got another vice presidential candidate, another vice presidential running mate. He's the governor of the state of Minnesota.
You get up in the morning and you doom scroll through things, and although I will say this, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. There will be news sometime, just so you know, there will be news.
We're going to save that soundbite. How many times do Democrat snipers have to show up and shoot President Trump or try to shoot President Trump? Honestly, one of their would-be assassins in court yesterday. The news media doesn't cover it. It's not a news story to the American news media. But it's good to make jokes about the assassinations. While the commies are talking about harvesting organs for themselves so they can become immortal. This is the planet Earth in 2025. The United States remains the beacon of light, the last best hope of mankind. The Democrats are trying to strangle us while we sleep. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a lifelong Democrat, member of the Democrat Kennedy family from Massachusetts, of course. And he's testifying on Capitol Hill. He's cabinet secretary in a Republican administration, HHS. And they're lying about him. The Democrats are smearing him and lying about him. Oh, you flew on Jeffrey Epstein's jet twice. Yeah, he was with us. It was decades ago, and he was with his family at the time. The crooked Democrats leave that out. But when RFK Jr., they're trying to assassinate his character, at least the Democrats are. And, you know, his father was shot and killed by a Palestinian who hated Israel. That's the Democrat Party today. His uncle, John F. Kennedy, was shot in the head by a communist. That's the Democrat Party today. Democrat Party's closer on the political spectrum to Lee Harvey Oswald. They're closer to Sirhan than they are to RFK and to JFK. But setting that aside, the hearing began today, and there was a leftist there.
Drug prices, prior authorization, information blocking.
Protester.
The committee will come to order.
She's being dragged out like the lunatic she is. You're going to kill 50 million people or something. He said he's not even anti-vaccine, but he said he'd like to check to see if they're causing negative effects on children. And in the meantime, in Florida, the Florida Republican Surgeon General, Joseph Ladapo, they're planning on banning all vaccine mandates in Florida.
The Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them. All of them.
And all of them. And I got to say, the crowd going wild. The Democrats are furious about this because, as you know, the Democrats don't care what you do as long as it's mandatory. And if you take away the mandate, you can still have your kid vaccinated to your heart's delight. Get all the vaccinations you want. But the Democrats insist and demand that everything be mandatory. They're Democrats.